destigmatizing emergencies, starting with autism. With that being said, welcome to RAW-tism, a podcast about my autistic experience and opinions on the world. On this podcast, I will be raw and unfiltered. Whether you listen to enjoy, hate listen, or just leave it playing on mute to support me, I appreciate the effort you put into my little program. Thank you! You're always welcome to disagree with me as long as you do so respectfully and with no name calling. I love you all! If you enjoy this podcast, please consider rating and reviewing RAW-tism to help others find me. Ensure you're following RAW-tism on your preferred podcast streaming service so you never miss an episode. We post a new episode every Monday, but you never know when we'll throw in a special treat during the week.
So, I know we haven't talked that much because I was really excited when I first met you. So if my voice throws you off a bit, because it changes, it gets higher and lower.
Okay.
And stuff. Just a heads up.
Okay. Yep. I'll just roll with whatever.
Okay. Can you take us on a journey through the evolution of this idea for Tap Dance Killer? A quick description of where it came from and how it's transformed over time?
Sure. So Tap Dance Killer, for maybe anyone who's not familiar, which I assume is, the majority of folks, is a comic book that I write, and it's about a woman who gets cast in a horror show musical. There's a supernatural event that locks people mentally in the role of the character, and she starts wiping out the mob. The journey of this character is so weirdly long, and it kind of follows my sort of oddball career too. Back in the late 80s, I started playing guitar in bands and formed my own band. It was called Nothing Like Vaudeville. And it had sort of like this dark 1920s surreal quality. So we had all these songs about characters that were like vaudevillains. And there was this Fletcher who runs a wax museum, kind of a warlock. There was Sir Terror, the mob boss, Mr. Hyde. And then I wrote this one song called Tap Dance Killer. And the band, we were playing for a couple of years around Greater Cleveland, some surrounding states. And my mom actually saw an ad in the paper that was for a haunted festival. And they were looking for 15-minute shows. So at the time, our band, we actually performed in makeup and, costumes, along the motif of these vaudevillains. So, and I had written for our concept album, it was laid out like a short, there were story segments between the songs, linking them all together. So I talked to the promoter of this haunted festival. I said, I think we could do a 15-minute show. I would do like a verse and chorus of each song, like 5 songs, and then I'll write script in between. So I did that. We got accepted into this festival, which was Clegg Park in Canal Fulton. And then we staged it, and it went over really, to my mind, better than the band ever did. It was seen by thousands of people, and the theater bug was in me. So we disbanded, and my brother Kurt and I spent a better part of a year taking the songs that we already had, rearranging them more musical theater style. I wrote new songs, and we turned this into what was called the Nothing Like Vaudeville horror show. I'm sorry, the Nothing Like Vaudeville musical. Rented out a theater and put on the musical. So Tap Dance Killer, again, was one of the songs. Now she was played by Jan Lynch instead of like Mike Jones, who was our lead singer. And, that led to me doing independent film. I wrote another musical. We made a movie about a guy who has an idea for a superhero, but he can't get it published. I wonder if I have a visual aid here. Let me see. No, I don't. So I directed a feature film. One of the things that happened with theater that always kind of was a little heartbreaking is when a production is done, it's gone. So I got this jonesing to make an independent film, and I thought if we make a movie, it'll always be there kind of just the way we left it. And so we made this. My friend Milo Miller and I co-wrote it. We co-produced it. I directed it. It's called Hero Tomorrow. And the quick premise, and I'm getting to the answer of your question, which was way back, centuries ago. Hero Tomorrow is about a guy who has an idea for a superhero. His idea is based on the premise that so many heroes are creature themed, but all of the good ones have been taken, like spiders and bats and things and panthers. So he makes up an animal called the Apama that's so powerful and stealth it was never yet discovered by mankind, and that is his superhero. So we made this movie about this struggling comic creator and his girlfriend. His girlfriend makes him the costume of Apama for Halloween, and he starts running around in it trying to fight crime, but with no powers. And fortunately for us, it debuted at the big San Diego Comic-Con, played film festivals all over the world. And one of the things we heard over and over was his Apama idea. There's really nothing like it in comics. So I was Milo and I both, lifelong comic fans, which is what really brought us together as friends and the whole film project, decided to make the issue 1 of Apama. And this subsequently launched our whole comic book universe. And you can forget everything I just told you about the movie because this is a different world. This is what he would have published. So this is about a Hungarian ice cream truck driver on the west side of Cleveland who unlocks the spirit force of the most savage beast mankind has never known, and becomes, Cleveland's resident superhero. All right. I still haven't answered your question, but I'm getting there. All right. So, I got to grab one thing. It's right over here.
No problem.
I got hired to do a documentary on Near West Theater in Cleveland because I do film work still. And they were actually moving their theater right across the street from where Apama lived in the movie and in our comic. And I told Milo, I said, wouldn't it be funny if Apama ends up joining a theater production? And we both really liked this idea. And, I was thinking, what musical would they be putting on? And I thought, I wrote a musical and it's got all these crazy villains in it. What if Nothing Like Vaudeville is the play that they're putting on in the comic? And Ilya, our superhero, gets cast as the lead role, the freak. And then Tap Dance Killer and Sir Terror and Fletcher, they're all there. So in Apama Volume 2, that's exactly what we did. And we introduced the Tap Dance Killer. And, images of her were being liked and shared by the thousands by people who didn't even know who she was. So I had to give her own series.
That's awesome. I already knew most of that, but it was still so fun to hear.
I apologize for you having to hear that twice.
No, it's no problem. Now the listeners of the podcast will know as much as I know, which is a lot of cool stuff.
Thanks.
Okay. So you do an excellent job in the PDF you sent me to read that had the origin of the Tap Dance Killer. Is that available to everyone else?
It is.
Somehow?
So on our website, which is herotomorrow.com, we have all single issues are available in some form. Sometimes we do different covers that might be sold out, but it is so in Apama, like Volume 2 has 6 issues in it. And it's this one and this one that so Apama 10 and 11 is where the Tap Dance Killer debuts. Although most people, when I'm selling it at conventions, I don't have time to get into all this unless they really want to know. So usually I just we'll pitch somebody the Tap Dance Killer book, which I do have right here on its own, and that one. It stands on its own. You can read this not knowing anything about her origin because we give you like a recap, and we really don't even reference back to Apama because I don't want people to feel like they're being left out. So it's gone over very well on its own, and people can just start with Tap Dance Killer Volume 1 if they choose.
So in the 2 Apamas that you sent me in that PDF, I haven't read the rest of Apama yet. But you do an excellent job of using memories and contextual clues to show us like who Apama is. So I was able to understand the storyline, which I really appreciated. And my favorite part was when he brought up his mom and we learned he was a country boy who says things like, "Whoa, Nelly."
Right.
It was great characterization.
Oh, appreciate that.
Would you recommend those who want to dive into the tap dance killer? My goodness. Those who want to go and read the Tap Dance Killer, would you recommend them starting with Apama the Undiscovered Animal comics first?
Well, so there's 12 issues of Apama, and I'm super proud of Apama. I think if someone's interested in Tap Dance Killer, they could order like issues 10 and 11, and then volume 1 of Tap Dance Killer, which would lead them into our new stuff as well. That would probably be the most pure way to do that character. But diving back through Apama right from the start is great too. When I do conventions, we always do a deal where you get the entire library, for like $85. So and budgets are for everybody's all over the place. So yeah, I think let me say this: the Marvel Comics adage used to be every comic is somebody's first comic. Because you could be, when I was a kid growing up, whatever was there in the grocery store, you just buy it. It could be issue 39 of Amazing Spider-Man or Marvel Team Up or something. And you just read it and they give you enough of a recap that you can just jump in. So that's what we've tried to do. So somebody could read Tap Dance Killer 2 and they should be fine. We really do try to make every comic accessible.
I struggle with figuring out what comics to read because I don't know where to start. So reading your comics and how you introduced me to it has really helped me feel more confident in just reading comics in general. So thank you for that.
Oh, my honor.
And I got a couple more questions about the origin story.
Sure.
Well, after the spell is cast on Nikki, who is the tap dance character's secret identity, that's it.
Yeah, Nikki St. Clair.
Yeah. After the spell is cast on Nikki and 2 of her castmates, she starts talking more like her character in the play. So she goes from the suave, smooth girl to type of like a Harley Quinn, more of like standing out and less being like blending in. How did you work on the transition between Nikki being herself and Nikki becoming the real life version of her tap dance killer character?
One of the dynamics that seemed like it would be fun was that all of these villains, her, Sir Terror, and Fletcher, sound like they're talking in the 1920s or something, so we you kind of do some research on what were common phrases or just some of the slang, and that just I think the nice thing about a comic book compared to a movie is there's a economics to the storytelling that if Nikki's in 4 panels, what we really have to do is come up with great dialogue for these 4 panels that does that. Where like in a movie, you'd have to have maybe a dialect coach, and the scene might go on much longer. So I really do like how with comics, you're letting the reader also fill in those gaps between the panels, which is, I think, a really important part of how we craft comic books, that the reader is also sort of the glue. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answered it fully, but that's kind of just how we did it.
That makes sense. Yeah, there is a difference between like the comics and the movies, and you kind of hear the voices different in your head when you read the comics. So I'd be interested in like diving into other people's brains and knowing how everyone like reads a tap dance killer differently. That'd be so cool.
Absolutely. We did a reading. We did a Tap Dance Killer cabaret night at the the theater complex in Lakewood. The symposium when they were closing, or one of the last things performed there. and we had everybody do a live reading. So we cast it, and it was fun. And I really been meaning to release it forever, but just haven't had the time.
Understandable. One more question for like the prequel comics, the what origin, that's the word. So one more question for that, and then we'll move on to the actual tap dance killer. But anyone who reads comics knows the sounds of fighting and other significant actions are displayed in bold letters with sound effects like bam and pow. Yours had a bit more variety, including crunch, pop, chock, and smack. How do you come up with these sounds?
Well, it's one of the most headache parts of the process, because one time I even put there was bowling going on, and I just put it up on Facebook. I put the panel, I said, we're going to have a prize for the person who comes up with the best sound effect for the bowling ball knocking down the pins. And my buddy came up with "cakraw," which I thought was so good. Yeah, I don't know. All these years of reading comics, I think you just kind of, there's something in the back of my head that tells me what these might be. But then you got to lay out the words so that they just kind of also look fun and jumbled and all that. So I'm grateful that you called those out. It's to me seems like sort of one of the least valued parts of making a comic, but if it's not there, you really notice it.
Yeah, there were some really fun words. I was like, ooh. Okay. In the beginning of the Tap Dance Killer Volume 1, by the way, which comics does Volume 1 have, just for reference for
It
everyone?
has all 5 issues.
Okay. So yeah. So I read all 5 issues of the Tap Dance Killer then. And in the beginning of the Volume 1 of Tap Dance Killer, Nikki is already the Tap Dance Killer. She's already in that mindset because she did that in the Origins. And when she goes to visit her mom, she's dressed like an old lady, and then she peels it off, and suddenly she's herself and she looks completely different. Is that supposed to be like just comic magic, we're supposed to go with it, or is there actual technology that she uses to like peel that face off so quick?
Yeah, well, so it's a great question. I can even pull up the part you're talking about here. So one of the things that I enjoy about Nikki as a character is she's this super talented actor. And that is something, when I wanted to make this into a series, I really wanted to lean into, because like her identity is blown. The city knows Nikki St. Clair is a tap dance killer. She has escaped from prison. So being a master of acting and disguises, and here's a way where I think like a TV or a movie, would be a TV show or a movie would be amazing, because what a role for an actor to be able to, all these different dialects, acting chops. But yeah, so here's that moment. She's pretending to go door to door, and her mother lets her in. She's talking about putting up a stop sign at a busy intersection, but the mom knows kind of right away that that's Nikki. And so she pulls off that mask. Now, there are prosthetic like masks that fit to your face and they would peel off. And, with Fletcher and his technology, he's able to do one of those that is extremely believable. And yes, you can just peel it off. So, but it would have been designed to graft to her face,
That's awesome. So is it like one piece, or would it be like layered plastic pieces, or how do
I
you
think it would be
that would
one,
work?
in this case, it would be one piece. It would just, the way they make these masks, and a friend of mine, Kevin James, who was involved with Nothing Like Vaudeville, he's the one who really taught me about it. They actually take you make a plaster mask of your own face, you put your face in this goop, and then it's made. They have this. Then on the other side of that, you can sculpt the new features. So when you put it on, it is so perfectly fit to your face, but the outside looks like another face.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Now, I mean, how perfect could it be in real life? You know, we are in comic book sci-fi, so you know, I'm not going to tell you that you wouldn't notice it if you saw it, but you know, this is our comic, and you know, and he's playing an older character, so there would be the wrinkles and all. So I think it. We hopefully, you know, people suspend their belief for a moment.
I love that. So it's a little both. It's a little comic magic and then also realism from what could happen in the world.
Yes.
A little mixture.
Gotta have both.
Exactly. And one thing about gotta have both, I love how realistic the tap dance killer's costume is. She had to go ask for somewhere to put her gun when
Right.
most comics just make the costume somehow full of weapon storage, like especially the women with the skimpy clothes. They're somehow pulling weapons out of nowhere. Like, guys, even if they have utility belts, they have more weapons that could possibly fit in those belts. So it was really cool to see how realistic she was. Like, I need somewhere to put my gun. What made you choose to have that moment and be very realistic with how her outfit works?
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show the moment. So this is our costume designer Gaspard, and so she goes to see him and says, you know, and they're kind of cute and flirty with each other. Obviously, although he's gay and he has no, extra interest in her other than the playfulness of it, but they tease each other a ton. And yeah, what made me think of it is, you know, I'm doing a lot of the coloring on the book, and I'm just looking at my character thinking, so is she holding? She's got a gun a lot of the times. Like, where is it going? And I think came to the same realization that my character came to is, hey, there's nowhere to put a gun. You know, where's she going to put it in her hat? I don't know. So yeah, it just grew out of that. And I'm also glad that you pointed that out, because the thing I've always loved about Spider-Man, for instance, when he's done right, is how relatable he is, how human Peter Parker is. Like, I never got that out of Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent. Those characters, to me, the costume, well, especially Superman, is Clark Kent. Like he is it's kind of reversed. So I always thought the drama that was going on with Peter Parker and Gwen and Mary Jane and Harry, Norman Osborn, like that is much more interesting than the fights to me. You know, it's like, you know, they always come up with a reason for a big fight, which, you know, that's comics. I get it. But if I don't care about these people, then I'm not going to continue reading it. And throughout the years, so many times I would buy comics and the character didn't pull me in. So my belief with our comic book universe is that let's lean into the humanity of these characters, and even the way we illustrate the city. I want Cleveland to look like Cleveland. I don't want it to be a big stylized Gotham City. I want you to see people you know in this, even if it's not exactly people you know people like it. So to me, if we can establish the ground, if we can ground the characters, ground the world, that gives us a much better platform to jump off into outlandish, alter egos and situations.
I love that. Yes, that explanation was perfect. And I also like how you mentioned how you use the real Cleveland and the real, like, Ohio in general. And I really love that. I grew up in Fairview Park, which is a suburb of Cleveland. So when I saw that on one thing, someone mentioned something happened in Fairview Park, I'm like, wait a second, that's where I grew up.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Yeah, I used to work in Fairview Park, right at 220th and Lorraine, a place called A to Z Audio. So it was always in my heart.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I lived off of 210. I'm obviously not going to say what my address was.
Oh, right. Oh, same spot. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually went to a school on Lorraine as well. so I know exactly where those streets are.
Hmm.
But it was so cool to have that moment. Like, this is a real place. I have been there.
Yeah. Oh, I'm thrilled. Thrilled.
You also mentioned other places like Lakewood. Obviously, you mentioned a bunch. I think you mentioned Cincinnati or Columbus or something. Like, you mentioned
Yeah,
some
Massillon,
other.
I think it's called out, and
Yeah.
there's a bunch. In Parma, like Old Brooklyn, Parma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really love that because it really feels like you're in it, other than some other comments which, even if they're like a real city, they'll just make up kind of places, which I understand. You don't always have your world fit into the real world, but I really like how yours is just like nice and in the world, and it's just like, these are all real places.
Yeah, and we scout. Having come from the movie side of things, I scout locations. I will send it to the artist. A good case in point with Tap Dance Killer is the cover to issue 2. Like, this was right around east side of Cleveland, this building, and it just there's a real building back there. It's not just something that I think it helps the artist too, because when you give them just a nebulous building, they might just not put they don't. Our artist on Tap Dance Killer lives in Indonesia, so I can't really expect him to get the flavor of Cleveland right when I'm right here. It's the least I can do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Not living in the area, having real inspiration photos and stuff like that would
Mm.
probably be a lot of help. That's pretty cool to think about. Okay, after volume 1 of Tap Dance Killer, you also talked me into buying, which I gladly did, the first 3 comics of Punchline and the Vaudevillains. So with these comments, are there going to be any more specifically Tap Dancer comics, or will Nikki's story just be told in Punchline and the Vaudevillains now?
Oh, great question. So in Tap Dance Killer, I'll just pull up another visual aid. We introduced this guy. He was in issue 2. Actually, it was the image I just showed. Heavyweight boxer who becomes this superpowered murderous clown named Punchline. He's part of the vaudevillain troupe. At Tap Dance Killer conclusion, I did, we called it Volume 1. And I think I was intending to go Volume 2. But then I thought there was a lot of interest in Punchline, and I thought, what if I just tell the tale of all these characters, but maybe shift the focus to Punchline a little bit. So when you start Punchline, for instance, it starts right where Tap Dance Killer left off. And one of the things that we did is, like, Nikki's father, he was really concerned about, obviously, everything that's going on with his daughter. They bring him in, and it's kind of our way of getting new readers who haven't read Tap Dance Killer into Punchline. She introduces her dad to every one of the characters, which his mind is just completely blown, and he's like, what are you doing? But it gets everybody involved. And it was a technique I'd read about when I was learning TV, because we've been trying to develop this for TV, is having a character that can ask the questions that the audience has. So the father is, that's not all he is, but he does serve that role.
Yeah, that's such a good scene. When I was reading that, I was like giggling to myself, like, wow, he must be like, what?
Yeah. We saved a baby, and we decided to, Dad, we just decided to keep it.
That part was great. I'm like, that's what I'm just like, I would be the one that's saying, okay, I'm in the situation. Let's take the baby. Like a D&D campaign or something. I really love that scene. Also, I love how you went right into the next question, where you do an excellent job weaving like the exposition into the story at the beginning of that first comic. Like you said, you make it so that people can start anywhere and not feel like they have to do the whole backlog, like watching the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe movies from the beginning in order to understand the newest Deadpool or stuff like that. You do a great job of that.
I
But
appreciate
do
it.
you have any advice for future writers on how to do that without making it be too like, here's the story so you're caught up?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm getting into that myself where, you know, we just debuted a new character, Violante, and we really do take a long time between issues the way it's currently going. I mean, we do a couple issues a year. So it is quite different than when I was growing up, and every month there was another issue, and I remembered what happened because it just came out last month. But here, you might have read that chapter a year ago. So I'm our universe is getting to the point now. We've got 24 issues in total, where it's we're teetering on being complicated for a new reader to just jump in. So the advice I would give, gosh, a lot of people I think that I've seen in the industry, indie people, they sort of like to start with this big populated universe, and almost all the time it is really tough to get into so many characters all at once. We started with Apama. You know, we did 11 issues of Apama, and each issue, like when our when our world starts, Apama 1, there are no superheroes, there are no villains. Okay, so it's a very relatable world. You get an origin in issue 1. Issue 2, the origin of the first villain. Issue 3 and 4, we bring in a menace from the moon. Then issue 5, we brought in Regina, who's like the hippie, trippy, psychedelic cult leader. She is his main nemesis. And we copied a little bit the Fantastic Four, because in issue 5 of the Fantastic Four, they introduced Dr. Doom. So we're like, all right, who's our Dr. Doom? And it's going to be Regina. So we allowed ourselves 4 issues to just sort of establish home base. And then we brought in the big baddie. And then we kept going. And then, so like, I guess because we started, I guess the advice I would give is don't worry too much about the complexity, but build your foundation in a way that is very accessible.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, and I like how you describe like bringing in the characters one by one instead of being just like, here are 15 characters you should know.
Well, it's one of the lines I use at comic conventions when I'm behind my booth. I'm like, hey, we can give you an experience you can't get from Marvel or DC Comics. You can get this right from the beginning, and that's that's unique. A lot of indies offer that, and that's one of the benefits of not being with a big publisher.
Yeah, I love that idea. Do you feel like you have a harder time selling comics because you're not with a big publisher?
Well, we are distributed with Diamond Comics, and the quick answer is yeah, it's harder to be an independent, absolutely. But we are in the comic shops. The stores. We're in the preview guide that the stores, from which the stores place their orders. And then we can do Kickstarters at the same time. I sell in the conventions. And, I've been across from publishers at conventions that are much bigger than me, but I do much more sales. I've seen it happen a bunch of times. And it's because I'm the writer creator presenting my work, where if you got a big publisher, they've got 30 books on their table and they don't pitch it like the writer of any individual book. Also, our whole thing is one shared universe. We got 4 titles, but it all interweaves. And that, if somebody comes and loves Tap Dance Killer, well, now we got Punchline. It's a spin-off of Tap Dance Killer. Or did you know she debuted in Apama? Then I can get them into Apama. So there's all kinds of reasons for readers who tried our stuff to, keep going deeper into the library.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to go back and read the Apama books. Well,
Appreciate it.
comics. I'm going to buy the volumes.
Like, I have to be an adult and not spend all my money all at once. That's why I haven't done it yet.
I'm also happy to hook you up with a really good discount.
Hey,
yeah.
appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
This has been fun.
Absolutely.
Do you have any final thoughts for me or the audience? Fancy words.
I just, do this because I love it. I think as indie creators, we really appreciate it when we're at conventions and, the patrons are in a mindset of, I don't have to read only Marvel and DC. I can try some of this indie stuff. And, there's benefits to following an indie universe like ours where, the creator is not passing it off to another writer every 3 years and they undo everything that you just did. Like Violante is set up in Tap Dance Killer, but now she's our new, that was intended, we have a big, Milo and I, or whatever I'm thinking about with, my daughter and I kick ideas back and forth, all this stuff, because we come out so slowly. I do think it adds to the quality of the reading experience, that we're not just spraying out 2 issues a month, where you really just can't control the quality when you go that fast. But my other thought is, thank you so much for having me and for your enthusiasm. It was great meeting you at Rubber City Comics and then seeing you again at the punk rock flea market. And so I'm so glad we were finally able to get this together.
Yeah, I'm really glad too. Thank you so much, Ted, for agreeing to do this interview with me. I've learned a lot, even more than what I knew before, and I know the audience will learn a lot. Hopefully, they will listen to this and immediately be like, "Ooh, I need to see all the comics," and then
HeroTomorrow.com. Yes, that would be the website.
Your sales will skyrocket, and I'll be just like, ha ha, I got you big, Ted. No, I'm not even that big, so it's probably not going to happen that way. But thank you for sharing your stories with the world. I can't wait for what you put out next, and hopefully you'll put out enough stories, and we can do another interview to go through that, and it could just become a thing, because this was really fun.
Oh, yeah. And congratulations to you for launching your channel and for what you're doing. And, I just wish you all the very best with that.
Thank you so much. Okay, that's all the questions I have for you. So that's all there.
Cool.
That was really fun. Always. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm not even here to tell you what or how to think. I'm here to share the autistic experience with you, from someone who is studying for their graduate certification in autism spectrum disorder, someone who, for the first 22 years of their life, was under the impression that they were allistic, and as somebody who since September 30th, 2022, has finally found their place in the world. I am autistic. I'm a part of the autistic community, and I'm proud of it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Regardless of your thoughts and feelings toward me, I would love for every one of you. You are wanted by many, you are loved by many, and so many want you to stay in this world. I am one of these manys and always will be. If you'd like to support this podcast, the description includes links with referral codes to Circles water bottles, Pair Eyewear's customizable glasses, and my favorite Amazon products. The transcript for this episode can be found for free on my Patreon, which is also linked below. Would you like to see more of me? In that case, visit EmKayArchlink.com for links to my other content. A new episode of RAW-tism comes out every Monday wherever you get your podcasts. Next week's episode of RAW-tism is posted on Patreon every Tuesday, ad-free and unedited. Karaoke videos are posted on Patreon every Thursday. Lastly, my book Unseen Powers is available in hardback, paperback, or digitally through Amazon. Remember to drink water, eat some